Welcome to I Wrote This News. Today is February 19, 2022. Every weekend, we will give you a wrap-up of the week's events, highlighting and expanding on listener favorites from the week. Let's dive in. Story number 1, Do you think I'm funny? Funny like a clown. President Biden called NBC journalist Lester Holt a wise guy when the veteran TV anchor pointed out that Biden erroneously said high inflation would be temporary, and that instead it surged to a new 40-year high. Holt noted, quote, I think it was back in July, you said inflation was going to be temporary. I think a lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is. Biden poked his cane in Holt's direction and grunted, quote, well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit. He then went on to ask Holt whether he'd heard that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was imminent and wouldn't he rather talk about that instead of inflation. Biden continued, saying, seriously, ma'am, the analysts are all saying that the invasion is going to happen yesterday. But one, no one really knows. Point 2, I think it's going to happen as early as day before yesterday. Number 3, we can't let Ukraine. Oh, my time is up. The Federal Consumer Price Index found overall consumer costs up 7.5% in January versus 1 year earlier, dashing White House predictions that the figure would begin to fall. Higher inflation means that your dollar is worth less, making it hard to buy goods and services as well as to vote for the incumbent. Story number 2, I write the songs that make the whole world leave. New Zealand authorities blasted out Barry Manilow's greatest hits in a bid to disperse anti-vaccine protesters camped out for days in front of the country's parliament building. According to local media reports, Parliament Speaker Trevor Mallard made the decision to play Manilow on loop after the protests in Wellington went on for several days. The protesters, who have been camped out in front of the Parliament building to protest COVID-19 vaccine mandates, were also subjected to Mac-A Rena. Mallard had reportedly resorted to blaring a playlist of the 25 most hated songs in the world after the protesters were unfazed by water sprinklers being used against them. Mr. Speaker, if that doesn't work, may we suggest including this podcast into your rotation. Story number 3, I tried scrubbing, I tried soaking, but I still can't launder this cryptocurrency. A New York couple has been arrested and charged with conspiring to launder $4.5 billion in stolen cryptocurrency funds. Law enforcement officials have seized $3.6 billion of those funds in what U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco called the department's largest financial seizure ever. Ilya Lichtenstein, 34, and his wife, Heather Morgan, 31, are accused of trying to launder money taken in a huge hack of cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex in 2016. At the time, the stolen crypto was worth about $71 million. Since that time, the price of Bitcoin has risen dramatically, pushing the value of the stolen currency into the billions. The government says in the court filing that when agents executed a search warrant at the couple's Lower Manhattan apartment on January 5th, they recovered more than 50 electronic devices including a bag cleverly labeled burner phone, and more than $40,000 in cash. As agents were about to begin the search, Morgan and Lichtenstein said they would leave their apartment, but wanted to take their cat, the filing says. The agents allowed Morgan to retrieve the cat, which was hiding under the bed. But as Morgan crouched by the bed and called to the cat, she positioned herself next to a nightstand that held one of her cell phones. She then reached up and grabbed the phone, and repeatedly hit the lock button in what prosecutors say was an apparent effort to make it harder for investigators to search the phone's contents. The agents had to wrest the phone from Ms. Morgan's hands. Court records provided no further information about the cat. In case you're wondering, no, I don't understand any of this either. Story number 4, Gray Lady Down, Wordle users cross. Wordle lovers have slammed the New York Times again over a puzzle's answer, with some branding it the worst in the game's history. Recently, fans have been complaining that it has become too difficult since the U.S. newspaper took over, with previous answers like cock branded too niche for most players. Fans also complained that words like niche were too niche, too. Another person, who failed to solve the puzzle, said, "Good morning to everyone except all of the staff at the New York Times, their families, friends, pets, and acquaintances." And although a recent day's answer was a more common word, many players still had problems, finding that even with 4 correct letters in the right spot there were too many possibilities for the correct answer. Wordle, which only offers 1 puzzle per day to keep fans hooked, has amassed millions of players since it came online last October. It was created by New York-based Welsh software engineer Josh Wardle for his girlfriend Palak Shah, who loves word puzzles, large piles of cash, and the New York Times. Story number 5, Splash Me Again, Padre. A priest in Arizona resigned after he incorrectly performed baptisms for decades, possibly derailing the rite for thousands of people. The Catholic Diocese of Phoenix on its website confirmed the Father Andres Arango used the words, quote, "We baptize you," instead of the correct phrase, quote, "I baptize you." He reportedly made the error in both English and Spanish. The diocese explained that the single incorrect word matters for worshippers because, quote, "It is not the community that baptizes a person and incorporates them into the Church of Christ. Rather, it is Christ and Christ alone who presides at all sacraments." Said the diocese, "Therefore, it is Christ who baptizes. If you were baptized using the wrong words, that means your baptism is invalid and you are not baptized." No explanation as to why the word "we" couldn't refer to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, nor why the priest using the word "I" automatically refers to Christ rather than the priest. But anyway, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Vatican's Orthodoxy Office, said in 2020 that baptisms performed by saying "we" instead of "I" are not valid. Catholic Canon also notes that baptism should only be performed once, saying, quote, "Every person not yet baptized and only such a person is able to be baptized." This could leave congregants in the tricky position of having to recall whether the priest used the word "we" instead of the word "I." Fortunately, priests can perform a conditional baptism which is valid only if it's needed. Here's what Jesus says on the question of whether the word "I" or the word "we" should be used when performing a baptism. February 19th is the 50th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar. 315 days remain until the end of the year. Now it's time for On This Date in History. On this date in 1807, former Vice President of the United States Aaron Burr is arrested for treason in Wakefield, Alabama and confined to Fort Stoddart. According to the accusations against Burr, he attempted to use his international connections and support from a cabal of U.S. planters, politicians, and army officers to establish an independent country in the southwestern United States and parts of Mexico. Burr's version was that he intended to farm 40,000 acres in the Texas territory which had been leased to him by the Spanish crown. In February 1807, Burr was arrested on Jefferson's orders and indicted for treason, despite a lack of firm evidence. While Burr was ultimately acquitted of treason due to the specificity of the U.S. Constitution, the fiasco further destroyed his already faltering political career. Effigies of his likeness were burned throughout the country, and the threat of additional charges from individual states forced him into exile in Europe. Burr's true intentions remain unclear and, as a result, have led to varying theories from historians. Some claim that he intended to take parts of Texas and the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase for himself, while others believe he intended to conquer Mexico or even the entirety of North America. The number of men backing him is also unclear, with accounts ranging from fewer than 40 men to upwards of 7,000. On this date in 1878, Thomas Edison patents the phonograph. On this date in 1913, Pedro Lascurain becomes president of Mexico for 45 minutes. This is the shortest term to date of any person as president of any country. On that date, General Victoriano Huerta overthrew the sitting president of Mexico, Francisco Madero. Lascurain was one of the people who convinced Madero to resign the presidency while he was being held prisoner in the National Palace, claiming that Madero's life was in danger if he refused. Under the 1857 Constitution of Mexico, the vice president, the attorney general, the foreign secretary, and the interior secretary stood in line to the presidency. As well as Madero, Huerta had ousted Vice President José María Pino Suárez and Attorney General Adolfo Valls Baca. To give the coup d'état some appearance of legality, he had Lascurain, as foreign secretary, assume the presidency, who would then appoint him as his interior secretary, making Huerta next in line to the presidency, and then resign. The presidency thus passed to Huerta. As a consequence, Lascurain was president for less than an hour. On this date in 1963, the publication of Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, reawakens the feminist movement in the United States as women's organizations and consciousness-raising groups spread. Friedan used the book to challenge the widely shared belief that, quote, fulfillment as a woman had only one definition for American women after 1949, the housewife mother. In 1957, Friedan was asked to conduct a survey of her former Smith College classmates for their 15th anniversary reunion. The survey found that many of them were unhappy with their lives as housewives, prompting her to begin research for the feminine mystique, conducting interviews with other suburban housewives, as well as researching psychology, media, and advertising. She originally intended to create an article on the topic, not a book, but no magazine would publish the work. The phrase feminine mystique was coined by Friedan to describe the assumptions that women would be fulfilled from their housework, marriage, sexual lives, and children. At that time, it was said that women, who were actually feminine, should not have wanted to work, get an education, or have political opinions. Based on her research, Friedan believed that, to the contrary, many women were unsatisfied and could not voice their feelings. In 1966, Friedan co-founded and was elected the first president of the National Organization for Women, which aimed to bring women, quote, into the mainstream of American society now in fully equal partnership with men. In 1970, after stepping down as now's first president, Frieden organized the nationwide women's strike for equality on August 26, the 50th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution granting women the right to vote. The national strike was successful beyond expectations in broadening the feminist movement. The march led by Frieden in New York City alone attracted over 50,000 people. Celebrating birthdays today are singer Smokey Robinson, novelist Amy Tan, actor Jeff Daniels, singer Seal, CRISPR pioneer and biochemist Jennifer Doudna, actor Benicio del Toro, journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, actress Haley Duff, actress Millie Bobby Brown, and astronaut Joseph Kerwin. He turns 90 today. Happy birthday to all of them, and if your birthday is today, a very happy birthday to you as well. By the way, if you or someone you know is having a birthday and would like us to announce it on the show, leave us a voice message or send an email. The links are in the show notes. Today's news was brought to us by the New York Post, the Daily Beast, CNN, the New York Times, the Daily Mail, the Independent, USA Today, the Code of Canon Law, and the website I go to almost as much as the bathroom, Wikipedia. If you have a comment or a question about anything you've heard today, or if you have a suggestion, please send us a note at IWTN, all one word, at thatradioshow.com. That email address one more time is IWTN, all one word, at thatradioshow.com.
One more thing, if this podcast sounds a little funny, that's because it's also an experiment. All of the vocals were generated using AI technology. Hopefully the show will sound different and better as the tech improves and as we improve at using it. I'm Bob Neese, hoping you have an amazing day. We'll get together again soon.